Please be seated. When I completed my terms as president of the Unitarian Universalist Association in 1994, I vowed that I would never preach in the pulpit of any minister who had not been kind to me when I was president. That eliminated 50% of the congregations, but not King's Chapel, because you see, neither Joy nor Sean were in the ministry when I was president, so they had no occasion to offend me. And I am therefore delighted, with great thanks to my friend Denton Cruz in particular, to be here in this historic pulpit with you, and very grateful to your ministers for their invitation. Now, I'm guessing that most of you bathed this morning, or at least last night, or at least last week. The reason I'm asking is because I read a study a number of years ago about how various religious communities ranked values. Now, it won't surprise you to learn that Roman Catholics, for example, ranked obedience to rules very high, whereas Jews and Unitarians and other liberal Protestants valued independent thought above almost everything else. One of my favorite examples of the kind of trouble you can get into when you don't obey rules is a story of that little Toyota Prius that was being driven one day across the vast expanse of the Mojave Desert in California, when suddenly it stalled dead in its tracks. But a few moments later, a roar was heard from behind, and up raced a brand new Jaguar. "Give you a tow?" asked the driver of the Jag. "Not on your life at the speed you're going," replied the timid owner of the Prius. But finally, they agreed to a rule. They agreed that if the Jag started going too fast, the Prius would just honk its horn and flash its lights, and the Jag would slow down. Well, this arrangement worked fine for about 50 miles, but suddenly another roar was heard from behind, and a top-of-the-line BMW passed them both going 125 miles an hour. And this was just too much for the driver of the Jag, and forgetting himself completely, he stepped on the gas and passed the BMW. Now, the next day, the driver of the BMW went into a foreign car dealer, explained what had happened. "I've got just the Jaguar for you," said the foreign car dealer. No, you misunderstand," said the driver of the Jag. The driver of the BMW. The Jag was going 150 easy, but right behind, flashing its lights, honking its horn, trying to pass, was a Toyota Prius. That's the little baby for me. But obedience to rules was not the thing that Unitarians and other liberal Protestants valued least in this survey either. The thing we valued least was hygiene. I see a few of you trying to slide unobtrusively away from one another, but you may be wondering what hygiene, what bathing has to do with human rights and social justice. The truth is that it has everything to do with them. The early Christian church thought that bathing was a sign of pomposity, of thinking yourself better than others. It said that during medieval times, Europe went for 1,000 years without a bath. But around about the 14th century, something changed. The historian Lynn Hunt explains it this way. Individuals increasingly felt the need to keep their bodily excretions to themselves. Urination in public, for example, became increasingly repellent. People began to use handkerchiefs rather than blowing their noses into their hands. Spitting, eating out of a common bowl, these became disgusting, or at least unpleasant. And with these changes in attitude toward the body, all of them signaled the advent of the self-enclosed individual, whose personal boundaries had to be respected. And you see, as people felt the need to respect one another's physical boundaries, the notion of human rights emerged. Think about it. If somebody smells disgusting, it's easier to conclude that they are disgusting. And if somebody is thought to be disgusting, it's a lot easier to be unkind to them or to do them harm. I once knew a minister, the pages of whose Bible had a tendency to stick together. And reading from the book of Genesis one Sunday morning, my friend intoned, "And when Noah was 120 years old, he took unto himself a wife who was," and then turning the page, but not realizing she had turned 2 pages rather than 1, "a wife who was 140 cubits long, 40 cubits wide, built of gopher wood and covered with pitch inside and out." Well, it is not a coincidence. It's not a coincidence that it took a lot longer to establish rights for women, whose bodies, though not covered with pitch, allow for some bodily processes which men thought of for centuries as unseemly. So you see, it's pretty short-sighted for those of us who claim to care about human rights to disparage hygiene, the care and feeding of the body. After all, as we were reminded by our reading from the Gospel of John this morning, Jesus signaled the importance of fellowship and loyalty by the profoundly humbling act of washing his disciples' feet, of bathing them, of caring for their bodies. But why do so many religions seem to disparage the carnal? Why is some Christians, for example, why do some Christians view sexuality with such disdain? Why is the spirit thought to be of greater value than the physical? Why do Orthodox Jews and Orthodox Muslims, even if they have nothing else in common, often think of bodies, particularly women's bodies, as dangerous vessels of iniquity? Why is the goal of nirvana understood by Buddhists and Hindus alike to be a release from attachment to the needs of the flesh? Well, of course, at the most basic level, it is because bodies decay and die. They are infested with worms, as Job so graphically puts it. But a breath of wind, the spirit, that at least theoretically lasts forever. Our bodies ultimately betray us all, but that which cannot be touched, cannot be captured, spiritual things like honor and hope and faith and grace and love, these things, unlike our bodies, never change. They're always there, always accessible to us, we pray. They will always stay the same. A religion that cares nothing for the body at all is a thin and pallid thing. We reject that. But of course, a religion that cares only for the flesh, for the material, and has nothing to say about spiritual things like honor and hope and faith and grace and love, that's not religion, that is idolatry. So, what we are seeking is a religion that values both body and spirit. We are like the 2 sister elephants observed by the animal researcher Katie Payne. The sisters had engaged in a fierce battle, which had resulted in the broken off tusk of one of them left jammed into the side flesh of the other. But a short while later, the sisters were observed walking peacefully side by side, the aggressor periodically licking the wound of the victim as they strolled, the very picture of reconciliation and atonement. We care about both bodies and souls, but we have to care about bodies first, simply because if you have too little to drink, or you can't feed your children, or you're in terror of the authorities, then things of the spirit like honor and hope and faith and grace and love are likely to be in short supply. If that elephant had succeeded in killing her sister in their fight, she would have had no opportunity to salve her sister in her pain. So then, how do Unitarian Universalists and many others manifest care for the body? In 1,000 different ways, but I think one of the best of them is through the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee, which celebrates this year its 75th birthday. We've been around since 1941, ever since we started rescuing the bodies of Jewish victims from the Nazis. Today, we work in 20 foreign countries and all around the United States. We do three things. We fight against climate change, we work for economic justice, and we protect rights that are at risk from governments or corporations or humanitarian disasters, always reaching out to the forgotten people who've been overlooked by the larger aid agencies, then finding the most innovative partners doing the most cutting-edge work, all for a very modest amount of money. I want to tell you just three examples of what we do. We know that the Syrian civil war has generated close to 4 million refugees, many now fleeing to Europe. UUSC has raised about $670,000 to help with the crisis in Europe, to provide for basic needs of food, water, shelter, to protect the refugees from attacks by angry locals, to provide information to them about immigration, all of that, yes, and to press the United States to double the number of asylum seekers we ourselves take in. But even before the crisis spilled over into Europe, UUSC was in the refugee camps in Turkey, offering a kind of assistance that nobody else was. The Red Cross, USAID, many others are trying to take care of the refugees' physical and medical needs, but no one except UUSC and our partner, Trauma Resources Institute, was addressing the emotional and psychological trauma of being displaced from your home by war, the toll that such deep stress causes upon hearts and bodies. UUSC has trained 19 specialists in trauma resiliency, sent them into the camps in Turkey. Each of them has treated around 500 people. That's almost 10,000 refugees. You did that, whether you know it or not, you and UUSC. Another example, this one from Guatemala. For many years, a Canadian mining company called Goldcorp was allowing toxic runoff from its copper mines to poison the water supplies of 18 communities of Mayan Indians, sickening their bodies. Of course, Goldcorp denied responsibility, and the Indians didn't have the power to stop them, so UUSC brought 2 mining engineers from Boulder, Colorado to Guatemala to document the damage. And then we and the Mayan Indians took the case to the Inter-American Commission of Human Rights. And guess what? A few months later, Goldcorp agreed to pay $27 million to make us go away, to clean up the water in all 18 Mayan communities. You did that, you and UUSC. One last example, this from Northwest Arkansas. That's the center of the poultry industry. Poultry factories are exceedingly unpleasant places to work. Most of the workers in them are therefore undocumented women. And that's why, even though the big poultry companies have lured those workers to this country with the promise of good jobs, have encouraged them to come across the border without proper papers, nonetheless, far too often the poultry companies then simply withhold the workers' wages. They steal them. There's no other word for it, because they know that the workers will be too frightened to go to the authorities to complain. Well, UUSC is not letting them get away with that. So far, we have retrieved about $600,000 in back wages, protecting the livelihoods and bodies of hundreds of women workers and their children. You did that, you and UUSC. Well, there's much more that I don't have time to tell you about. Our work to save the glaciers in Argentina, to bring water to the Central Valley of California, where it is not unknown for tadpoles to flow out of home water taps. I've seen them. Our work to stop family violence in Sudan. You're doing this, you and UUSC. You're doing what the late, great evangelical preacher Reverend Ike used to call tangibilitating your Unitarian, Universalist, liberal, Protestant values. Now, I know that all of us have 1,000 different causes that we're asked to support, but there's only one that has the following characteristics. It reflects our religious values. It spends 82 cents of every dollar on helping people and only 18 cents on overhead. It receives a 4-star rating. That's the highest you can get from Charity Navigator for efficiency and transparency. It makes sure that women and women's interests are included in every program. And it's run by Bill Schulz. No other organization can say all of those things. I stand by the bed where a young woman lies, wrote the medical surgeon Richard Seltzer in his beautiful book, Mortal Lessons. I stand by the bed where a young woman lies. Her mouth is twisted in palsy. A tiny twig of the facial nerve, the one to the muscles of her mouth, has been severed. As a surgeon, I had followed with religious fervor the curve of her flesh. I promise you that. Nevertheless, to remove the tumor in her cheek, I had had to cut the little nerve. Her young husband is in the room, and together they seem to dwell in the evening lamplight, isolated from me, private. Who are they, I ask myself, he and this wry mouth I have made? The young woman speaks. Will my mouth always look like this? She asks. Yes, I say, it will. It is because the nerve was cut. She nods and is silent. But the young man smiles. I like it, he says. It is kind of cute. All at once, I know who he is. I understand, and I lower my gaze. One is not bold in an encounter with a manifestation of God. Unmindful of my presence, he bends to kiss her crooked mouth, and I am so close I can see how he twists his own lips to accommodate to hers, to show her that their kiss still works. I remember that the gods appeared in ancient Greece as mortals, and I hold my breath and let the wonder in. Well, you see, there is a profound connection between body and spirit, and you have an opportunity this morning to make that connection. UUSC gets no financial support from the denomination. We take no government money. Very few churches put us in their budgets. We are supported entirely by you as individuals. So if you're not already a member, I hope you'll join. It will cost you only $40, and we know you won't spend that on soap. King's Chapel reported that you have 203 members, but only 6 of you, or 4%, are current members of UUSC. I think we can do better than that, don't you? Our goal this morning is to add at least 14 new members so that you can say that 10% of you are members of UUSC. So I hope if you haven't already, you'll fill out the envelope. Either send it in to us, give it to me at the back of the church, take it to the parish house after this service. Maurice Sendak, the author of the great children's book, Where the Wild Things Are, said that the favorite letter he had received from a child was this one. Dear Mr. Sendak, how much does it cost to get where the wild things are? If it is not too expensive, my sister and I would like to spend the summer there. So I hope you'll join me where the wild things are. It's not too expensive because, you see, in the battle for the care of bodies, it's not enough to wish, not enough to talk, not enough to worship, not enough to hope, not enough to pray. They're all good, but they're not enough in the face of tyranny and repression and greed and fear. What is required is to join hands to use our collective power to make our voices count, our values live, and our faith shine. So I hope you'll give me your hands, give me your feet, give me your hearts, and give me your money. And together, let's make every crooked mouth a source of pride, every human imperfection a sign of beauty, and every blessed human body a holy vessel worthy of our most fierce protection. Amen.